This is the so-called haunted doll part two. Um, I've been talking to a couple of actual doll collectors about this doll and try to get more information on what it is and where it was made and all that other stuff. So from the previous owners, I got some information about what it is or where it came from. They weren't true doll collectors, so someone happened to watch this video and they got back to me, and then I contacted them to find out what's going on with this really weird doll here. So found out that this was a series of limited edition kind of dolls that was made in Bavaria back in 1913. This is what is called a non-rooted doll. A non-rooted doll. A rooted doll and a non-rooted doll is all about their hair. All those early dolls had their hairs glued to their scalps, and then the later dolls, sometimes in the 30s, what I was told, had all those tiny, those bunch of little holes in the top of its head where they actually attach the hair strands in. Those are what are called rooted dolls. This is a non-rooted doll. Most of your non-rooted dolls in that time period, from whenever to about 1929, 1930, were non-rooted dolls. I was told this particular porcelain doll was made in Bavaria somewhere in 1913. He gave me reference to Steiner dolls, but a lot of the Steiner dolls had plastic or porcelain movable arms. This particular doll has moving parts, but not like some of the dolls that I did see online when I decided to go and look for myself. She is definitely not plastic, that's for damn sure. He thinks that the guy that I talked to, a guy named Glen Thompson, who is a doll collector for these old kind of dolls. He says this is a 22-inch porcelain doll. He thinks it might be Steiner, but I know I looked at a lot of the Steiner dolls, and she doesn't look like a Steiner doll unless she was, I mean, when the other lady had her, she was heavily modified. You can tell by her skin was repainted. It was glossed over. The eyes are blackened. So he thinks it's a French doll made around 1913. He definitely said, I mean, when you look for stamping, I didn't want to actually take the doll out and look for stamps. It says it'd be a stamp either in the back of her neck, smaller back, or he says, or those are places to look for, different types of stampings. I said I didn't even get a chance to look at her by actually looking on her back or under her dress. Well, that's kind of creepy. But anyway, he says for sure the doll is definitely pre-World War I. He says, by all means. And I said, and what about the modifications? He says the modifications, those are all done sometime in the 80s. The hair is different. He says the chances of it might have had blonde hair or brown hair before the hair was removed off the scalp. For the owner that I got before the previous lady, obviously removed all the hair, and apparently she repainted it and glossed it over, and then pretty much glued this crazy looking black hair on her head and put this crazy necklace on. The dress is all custom made. He thinks actually the dress might even be a little bit older. He told me a little bit something about adult type of female dolls with non-adult female dolls. Most of the female dolls in the time period which I looked at, from the late 1800s to the early 1900s, they're all flat-chested. They didn't have wide hips or round hips or anything like that. This particular doll actually has a bust line, and her hips are actually kind kind of widen a little bit, so it makes it kind of an adult or early teenage doll. So I asked, I said, how accurate was the guy's findings? And we talked for about an hour, and he says he can pretty much guarantee you, despite it being a heavily modified and repainted doll, that it's definitely over 100 years old. She has, like I said in the previous video, she had like little cracks that was fixed. You can see very, very little cracks and lines. And I said, well, it was supposed to be a haunted doll, not like that. And a couple of people reportedly they heard weird shit in the middle of the nighttime, like scratches or bumps or knocks. So I'm not really sure. I really dig the haunted doll thing, but according to a couple guys that hang around here, and Nicholas, who sleeps in the other room here, he claims he heard a lot of weird knocking in here in the middle of the night, roughly about 1 or 2 in the morning. So I myself could have heard some weird scratching. We thought it might have been the cat, but the cat actually can't knock. So one of these nights, if anything kind of weird happens, I'm going to get my tape recorder. I got an old-fashioned cassette tape recorder, and I'll see what's going on. But other than that, this is an update on Helena, the, I guess, century-old haunted doll, or goth doll, or whatever you want to call it. So this is actually just a kind of an update of the last video and some information I found out about. And I'd like to thank Mr. Thompson for taking his time, sending me the emails, and actually giving me a call to talk about this doll. And he says she is actually over 100 years old. He says during that time period, there were very few 22 to 24 inch dolls that was made of porcelain. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe I can get some comments from some of the other doll collectors here that would actually have a pretty good idea or more information about it. And there you go.